I out of my head? Am I out of my mind? If you only knew the bad things I like, don't think that I can't explain it. What can I say? It's complicated.
How's it going, YouTube? We're here to talk about the Mivec swap to a 3G or really just a Mivec swap in general. The things you will need and little tech tips. First thing you're going to need is the motor. Of course, you're going to need the 7.5 motor. I found mine online. Next thing you're going to need to track down, and you can find these at a junkyard, you can ask around, that's what I did. Basic things you're going to need is parts from the Diamante or the 6G74 in general. You're going to need the upper power steering bracket, you're going to need the alternator bracket, you're going to need the thermostat housing with the crossover piping, so that's the pipe that goes from the water pump to the thermostat. You're going to need that, and you're going to need the and I highly recommend it. You can probably find it off the 7.2. I found mine off of the Diamante, but you can also, for the cam sensor plate, or where the cam sensor plate is on the motor, because you won't be using it. Okay, so let's talk about intake. The intake, right? So there's two options you can use, or three, you know, if you want to find somebody to do a custom manifold, whatever, what have you. But intake is for, you know, you can use the 6G74 intake. You have to gasket match it, you have to make it bigger. It's, you know, made for 3.5, it's not made for 3.9, so the plume is a little bit smaller. So with that, you know, but with that you can use the fuel rails without modifying them. So now for the 7.5 manifold, I'm using the 6G75 manifold that came on the motor, but I had to modify it a bit to make it fit. Now the lower intake manifold, I didn't really have to do anything to that. I gasket matched it, and I you know, had it poured and polished, what have you. That's mine. You don't have to really do that unless you want to. It's out of the car anyway, because you have to get down to the knock sensor, and with the knock sensor you have to get to the crossover plate and whatnot. The front of the intake manifold needs to be trimmed to fit. You will run into that. I mean, if you forget, you definitely will notice the, you know, the little PCV valve here will need to be pushed off to the side, and that hole needs to be covered up. There is a hole right here on the top that needs to be covered up. I didn't use the EGR valve, depending on where you're from, and if you have emissions or the purpose of the car, you will need to figure out how to do the EGR valve for emissions purposes. I didn't use it, like I said, but I blocked it off, used a Street 2 Motorsports block off for Evo. More things with the Evo. I have an Evo throttle body. With the throttle body, I had to gasket match it. It wasn't perfect. You can also use the 6G74, but you cannot use the 6G75 because it is a drive-by wire, and we have drive-by cable on our cars. The throttle body cable, you have to figure out how to run it, where to put it. I did mine. It's pretty simple. It's just stuff that you will run into, but just keep in mind that you will have to figure out how to do that. With the throttle body, you will need to know which sensors you're going to be using. So I have an Evo throttle body, so I have to use the, you know, the TPS and the AIC sensors for that throttle body for an Evo. Had to pin it out, make sure the pins were all right, and what have you. So we talked about parts from the 7.4, we talked about the fuel rails, we talked about intake, the intake mods and the throttle body mods. Now let's talk about the transmission mods. Transmission mods, you know, they're pretty basic. The transmission you will be using is either the 5-speed or the auto that came in your car. So unless you know, you want to do a 5-speed swap, and I don't, you know, I've never done that. So, but I use the 5-speed. So with the 5-speed, you will need the 5-speed transmission. 5-speed transmission bolts right up to it. All, you know, I wouldn't say all, but you know, bolts right up to it. Transmission bell housings are pretty simple, similar. you will need to do that. Now with the transmission mods, highly recommend to swap over to an LSD, limited slip differential. I did it. It's amazing. Even if you don't do the swap and you're watching this, I highly recommend using a LSD. Now with LSD, I have the lightweight flywheel from Fredanza. I bought that, put it right on. Now all these, you know, this is all stuff from the 7.2. So you're not going to go out and buy the 6G75 transmission or 6G75 clutch. So you're going to use the 7.2 clutch and flywheel. So bolts right up to it. Let's see. Let's go over the clutch. Clutch, I have a competition stage 3 clutch. Now, I could have probably got away with stage 2, depending on where you get your clutch from and how they have it. So I have a stage 3. You know, it's amazing clutch. Now let's talk about side mounts, which ones you're going to be using. So the side mount or engine mount that you're going to be using is from a 6G72. The whole mount from those 4 bolts that connect to the motor, you're going to be utilizing the side mount from the 7.2. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Let's talk about the rear intermediate shaft. So on the V6, if you haven't done a CV axle, it has on the passenger side, it's not one single from the transmission to the tire CV axle. It's broken down. I kind of like it because it makes it equal length shafts and you're not putting so much torque in the middle of that really long shaft. So the intermediate shaft that you're going to be using is from the 6G72, the one that you're going to be using, but in the back of the 6G75 motor there is offset bolts that were on the intermediate shaft for the 7.5. Now you're not going to be using the 7.5, so you got to make those flush. So take a grinder easily and just, you know, even them out and make them flush. It's really the only way. About Mivec. The bread and butter is why we're here, so we can do the Mivec. Everything that I talked about probably work for the non-Mivec swap. Never done it, but I'm pretty sure it's, you know, pretty much the same thing. Now for the Mivec is operated in the heads by oil control valves. Now back to the motor itself, you need to get the right year motor. Not every year motor works. You have to have a front oil control valve, which is the Mivec solenoid for that. You need the front one. You need the, you know, you need the one with 2 of them. There's one in the front and there's one in the rear that you'll need. So with the oil control valves, you need the front one. Now to run Mivec, you will definitely need the distributor plate from Matt at Blackheart Motors. Now you can get away with, and there's been people before he developed this plate have been doing it, and they've been doing it off the, putting the distributor off the front head and modifying the thermostat housing to fit that. Now it looked a little weird. I didn't really like it, and I'm glad that he made this plate because I didn't want the distributor looking like a Honda in the front. I kind of wanted to hide the distributor where it originally was. I wanted everything to look like it was meant to be there from the factory as best as possible. So you order it, you get it, and it's a beautiful piece of work. So this is the Mivec plate that you're going to be using. Distributor is going to go through the hole clearly. It's just going to be sandwiched between your head and the distributor, and the line for the oil is going to go from the front head all the way around, and it's supplied, so don't have to worry about making lines or anything. It's supplied from the front head to here. It's going to go through a channel on the inside, and it's through this hole. Through this hole, it's going to activate the Mivec. And so fuel rails, like I said, you're going to need bigger fuel rails. The ones that come on the 7.5 will not work. They are only a feed. They don't have a return, so they won't. Fuel rails, I have mine. They're modified from a Diamante, so they're 7.4 fuel rails for the 3.5. Their tabs have been cut off and re-welded. I found those. Steven did those for me. You can find anybody really to do that. I've seen a couple different ways to do it. Some of weird ways, but you could do that. Anything to help. Fuel injectors you keep from the 7.5. Those were fine. Just the fuel rails are going to need to be redone. Now, once you have all that, that's all nice and put in there, you will need a way to control the oil control valve solenoid. You will need an RPM window switch. Now, this one is an RPM window switch. It's digital. It has digital display on there. It hooks up right to the signal wire on your distributor. It's pretty simple. Like I said, you set it to where you want it open, set it there, and go on without your day. But I do not recommend this type. This is junk, in my opinion. It's from Summit Racing. Any digital ones were junk. Now, you might have better experiences with it than I do, but I highly recommend the MSD one, the chip style. Joey Miller is using one. I highly recommend that because this one on my road trip, it would fluctuate, it would jump, jumping at lower RPMs, opening it up. It was just erratic for that. Now let's talk about ECU wire harnesses and sensors. I run into the common, oh well, how hard is it? Do I need the ECU from the 4G? Do I need a wire harness? The wire harness is pretty similar. You're going to use your stock wire harness. It's going to be no different. The only difference is depending on what throttle body you use. So if you use the 7.4 throttle body, you could go on to how to swap out the intake manifolds, and it will show you and tell you how to use the IAC and the throttle position sensor. Now, I use the Evo, so I had to figure out how to use the Evo sensors because the Evo sensors are not the same as the 7.4 or the 7.2. The reluctor wheel on the crankshaft will need to be changed, and the crank sensor position sensor will need to be changed to the Evo, or my mistake, will need to be changed to the 7.2. So you can just pop off your pulley on your 6G7.2. It's that little plate behind the wheel, the little wheel on the back. It's that little plate on the back of it. It's just a signal to let the ECU know where the crank is. So you will need that in order to it. Now, the stock 7.5 one cannot be used. It's got these little teeth, and it's kind of annoying. While you're in there, I highly recommend you do timing because you're going to have it all off anyway. Highly recommend you do timing and do all the basic maintenance that you would need for the car to run efficiently. For the ECU, you will need to get into your ECU, and you will need to be able, with a computer, with a cable, you will need to be able to open up your ECU and find a tuner. Now, a tuner is very hard to come by. I found Merlin online. He got me an XML file, and then I had, my car was going to get tuned by another shop, and they ended up backing out, saying that they didn't know how to tune it. So I found my buddy Kiwi over at another shop. We dyno tuned it. It made with low compression pistons, because my motor's built with lower compression pistons, with a pretty much modified base tune. I made 224 to the wheels. So you can make a lot more. It's not a stock motor, and it was not built to be a stock motor. It's built for boost, and you know, if you've seen any of my stuff, you know that I'm boosting my car, and I have a lot of other goodies that are going onto my car. So with that, I highly recommend to upgrade your motor mounts to stiffer motor mounts, some solid motor mounts, and I highly recommend you getting a engine damper for the V6. It just helps a lot to control it. Like I said, you know, you want your power to go to your wheels, and that is that. So I hope I helped you with the 7.5 swap, and I hope to see a lot more 7.5 swaps. Please, if you are doing a 7.5 swap, or you think about doing a 7.5 swap, find me on Instagram, tag me in it. I love seeing the way people have done it, and I like to advance it. The more people we have involved doing these 7.5 swaps, the more companies see that, and the more that we put into this platform, the more companies see that, the better things we will have. I had to, you know, I had to customize a lot of things. Oh, again, the exhaust that I am using the stock manifolds for the 7.2. Now, I highly recommend getting headers and going from there, and probably a custom down or Y pipe. But I use the 7.4 or 7.2 manifolds and Y pipe. Why? Because I knew I was going to be boost. I didn't really want to get into trying to find headers, trying to do this, trying to do that. So that's 224 was made off of stock headers. So, and an NVIDIA, you know, catback. So, like I said, I hope I helped you. Any questions, please feel free to comment. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I hope you find this video very helpful.